Imagine, if you will, a society where a fair amount of the human population is dependent on chemical substances, be they legal or illegal. Now imagine that the benefits and hazards of said substances could be proven through scientific fact and reason, but that necessarily wouldn't suit the narrative for certain corrupt government officials or corporations. Ergo, what follows is not just a crackdown on the regulation and trafficking of said substances, but also widespread surveillance across the country pertaining to individuals not only possibly involved in said substance abuse, but also just voicing their opinions with regards to society and its incorporation of drug culture as a whole, resulting in a police state that not only instills widespread paranoia amongst the population, but also instills very brutal and authoritative regimes when it comes to its enforcement of certain legislation regarding drugs and substances, as well as freedom of speech. I know, what a completely ludicrous science fiction premise, am I right? With the Blu-ray release of Blade Runner 2049, I figured now would be an appropriate time to talk about another Philip K. Dick adaptation that I consider to be a guilty pleasure treasure. And as far as I know, this film did get a pretty positive reception when it first was released in 2006, but it flew under a lot of people's radar and was kind of going up against a lot of commercial giants during that year, so it kind of came and went, not even being able to recoup its $8.7 million budget. I am of course talking about Richard Linklater's A Scanner Darkly.
Substance D. D.
D is for dumbness and despair and desertion. The desertion of your friends from you, you from your friends. Everyone from everyone.
Isolation and loneliness and hating and suspecting each other.
I was really drawn in by the trailer for this film when I first saw it, not just based off of the actors involved, but also off of the style it was going for, involving the rotoscoping. Now, I'll be honest, I wasn't familiar with the Philip K. Dick novel at the time, but after watching the film, I did go back and go through the book and kind of see what were the comparisons and huge contrasts between the film adaptation and its source material. And honestly, aside from the fact that Dick's novel takes place in the far-flung future of 1994, and the movie takes place pretty much close to our modern time frame, there really weren't that many drastic differences between the stories. Basically, the story of A Scanner Darkly revolves around our central character Bob, played by Keanu Reeves. He happens to be an undercover government agent while also being a recreational user of this new drug called Substance D, which has pretty much become an addiction for 20% of the American population. Substance D causes strong hallucinations in its users, as well as the potential for some more potentially lethal side effects. And it's up to Bob to monitor and arrest any potentially dangerous users or distributors, some of whom may actually live with him. But as the plot progresses, you find out that Bob is kind of going through something of his own identity crisis. And his issues of identity and self-worth are further compounded by the fact that he is tasked with monitoring himself.
As of now, I'm officially assigning you to observe Archer. If we're ever going to get to the bottom of this, I have a hunch it'll be through this guy.
So will that mean full-time viewer recording?
We got no choice.
See, in the not-too-distant future, government agents who are undercover rely heavily on their anonymity to stay intact. This often results in them having to wear these fancy suits that are constantly shifting their image, but that they also report to each other and carry out these operations, not really knowing who they're reporting to or working with.
Well, we take it for granted that you are one of the individuals that are in Archer's circle of roommates and friends that frequent the house. Jim Barris or Ernie Luckman, Charles Freck, even Archer himself. Hell, you could be Donna for all I know.
As my superior, I figure you'd know all this stuff.
How the hell would I know?
And I feel that's really where the style of the movie accentuates the themes that are being approached in the story. Sure, the rotoscoping animation helps to very much capture the performances of the actors and keep their likenesses very much intact, but also it serves it well when it has to tread into something a little bit more mind-bending, such as the hallucinations on Substance D.
Okay, you broke my flow, so now I guess I'll just have to segue down to the near, and that's just it. You see, he didn't pose as any of those. He just pose as a world-famous imposter. And he was pushing a broom at Disneyland or something. He saw that.
If this was just done with regular live action, I don't feel that the paranoia and the claustrophobic feeling of these sequences would be as effective as they are here. As a result, there are moments throughout the film where it gets really trippy, and you're not quite sure exactly what is reality and what is just kind of a delusion taking place in Bob's mind. But you are fully dedicated to the narrative as you try to figure out just exactly what the end game of the movie is going to be. And for some of you out there who aren't familiar with the material beforehand, the ending might kind of take a very bleak and nihilistic turn for you. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but when I first saw this film, after all the weird hallucinations and trippy sequences amongst the roommates that I was witnessing, the ending did kind of take me aback a little bit, to the point where I was kind of just at the end of it thinking, life sucks. And ultimately that may have been the intention of not just this film, but of Dick's novel in the first place. See, Philip K. Dick's original novel was semi-autobiographical in tone, I suppose, as it kind of chronicled what he was going through in the mid-1970s with regards to his drug addictions. But at no point does it feel like the film or the book were getting really preachy about those themes. They're certainly there, and they certainly do have their moment to shine when it comes to, say, being able to understand when you have a problem and kind of recognizing the horrors of drug addiction. But I feel they're very well balanced out by the all-consuming surveillance and police state mentality that is exemplified in both stories. It's ultimately a cautionary tale on two fronts when it comes to society's drive towards more paranoia-induced tactics when it comes to enforcing certain regulations or laws, and also reflecting and contemplating a little bit on the choices we make and the substances we allow into our bodies. But again, it never feels too heavy-handed with it and is balanced well in this sci-fi setting. And I know what some of you might be thinking, sci-fi setting, it just looks like regular California to me. But again, that's where the rotoscoping and animation really serves the story well. Not only is it supporting this idea of these hallucinations that are overpowering, or this very just wacky and surrealistic type of plot, but to kind of also hammer home the idea that there is something very alien or something just a shade off from our regular world going on here.
What happened?
I think this is further supported by the phenomenal casting. Keanu Reeves is a perfect straight man to all of these shenanigans taking place in this story.
You know, Fred, if you keep your sense of humor like you do, you just might make it after all.
Make it. Make what? The team? The girl? Make good? Make do? Make out? Make sense? Make money? Make time? The Latin for make is facere, which always reminds me of fuckere, which is Latin for to fuck. And I haven't been getting shit in that department lately.
He has his own time to be able to shine and show off like the damage that this existence has done to his mind. But he is very much our point of view character who is overshadowed and very reactionary to all the fantastical characterizations that inhabit the world with him.
There's only one thing we can do to thwart the plot of these albino shape-shifting lizard bitches. We are going to take this bike outside, ask the first person we see. We're going to introduce some novelty.
One of the biggest characterizations in this film has to be Downey Jr. as Barris. And even though this is a couple of years before his resurgence in popularity with the Iron Man movies or Sherlock Holmes, this coupled with his appearance in Zodiac is what won me back over to enjoying Robert Downey Jr. as an actor again. For long stretches of time, Barris will go on these nervous, paranoid-fueled tangents, and you are just enthralled by the vocabulary and the vernacular that he incorporates into these monologues.
Oh, no, I have a veritable cornucopia, and much of it is directly referencing the organization and its directives.
Who are these people? What organization?
It is primarily Arctur and Hawthorne. I have coded notes here, which may be of some interest to you. My own cryptology is very difficult to...
Amidst all of his silliness and his wackiness and his harebrained schemes, you can tell that there is a genuine malevolence to Barris. The same can be said for the other characters, such as Harrelson's Luckman.
Hey, come on, cool it, you guys.
Step back, frickin' frack. Ernie's on the attack. What is this? Come on.
I'm desperately afraid.
I'm gonna knock your nads up into your nostrils for talking to your betters that way.
You can tell that he's playing into a little bit of the dopey stoner Spicoli type of character, but he has a hairpin trigger when it comes to his temper for sure. Winona Ryder's Donna, while playing sort of this sweet and innocent girlfriend to Bob, also you can tell has a bit more of a duplicitous side going on, and you're never really quite sure what that is up until the very end of the movie.
You have a habit.
We all do. I mean, so what? What's the difference? I'm happy. Aren't you happy?
Substance D?
Ate his head. Another loser.
It's easy to win.
And then there is Rory Cochrane, who I feel is greatly underappreciated in this movie as Freck. His constant nervous tics and just fidgeting and the hallucinations he experiences, especially when he's on his own, are unbelievably captivating from a visual standpoint, but also a performance standpoint.
Instead of quietly suffocating, Charles Freck began to hallucinate. The next thing he knew, a creature from between dimensions was standing beside his bed, looking down at him disapprovingly.
You gonna read me my sins?
Throughout a majority of this film, he'll be working off of these other actors who at times have a little bit more grounded reality going for their storylines, and he'll just cut to his face where he's constantly like, no, I'm fine.
For instance, I could show you how to sleep with her for less than $3.
I don't want to sleep with her. I want to buy from her.
I'd like to think that this is just basically Lucas from Empire Records a couple of years later after the store eventually shut down and Joe kind of left him to his own devices. And yeah, I have to bring this up. Alex Jones shows up in this movie. I mean, he had kind of a bit part in one of Linklater's previous films, but he shows up briefly in this movie as a sidewalk preacher who gets tased by government agents.
Our every waking moment, tracked and traced and scanned. It's time to stop submitting to this tyranny. Stop selling out your own species.
So there's that working in this movie's favor. In all the resurgence of good grounded sci-fi, and especially with this recent kind of interest in Philip K. Dick adaptations being good again thanks to Blade Runner 2049, I'm hoping A Scanner Darkly gets a little bit more attention as sort of the forgotten classic that it was. It's got great characterization, great storytelling, even if it is a little trippy and weird, and a great stylistic endeavor taken on by its director and creative team. I would almost say it's a successor to a lot of the late 60s and early 70s films that talked about drug culture, such as The Trip or even Easy Rider to an extent. Movies that had such a clear-cut voice when it came to their characters and stories, but weren't afraid to take some kind of weird visual risks. And A Scanner Darkly certainly represents the visual risk. The fact that it was released close to the release of other giant animation spectacles such as the first Cars movie, there's some pretty big cojones on Linklater and company to be able to pull that off. And yeah, I did mention that while it was in theaters, it didn't really recoup its budget, but I feel it's gained a lot of appreciation as a cult classic. And again, my intention and hope is that with this sudden turnaround back to the indie filmmakers and the content they're focused on, something like A Scanner Darkly can be appreciated in a more positive light by the general audience. So by all means, find a copy of what I consider to be a little known but well appreciated sci-fi classic. So until next time, people, just remember, you're being monitored, and drugs?
Hey, you guys.